Okay, welcome everybody to this webinar. As I said at the beginning, this is making the most of your whiteboard. So the whiteboard, an integral part to any classroom, and we'll be looking at how to make the most of it during this webinar. As always, you'll receive a certificate of participation and a webinar handout in the next few days. If you don't receive it, email us at formazione@mlaworld.com and we'll get one sent out to you as quickly as possible. Okay, so Ruth.
Hello, everybody. So let's start with a brief introduction. So in this webinar, as Luke pointed out earlier, we'll be looking at ways to develop better use of the whiteboard in the EFL classroom. We'll be looking at the importance of the whiteboard in the classroom, as well as strategies for effective use of the whiteboard. And we're going to try and expand the whiteboard's function, and we'll look at common pitfalls and solutions to those pitfalls. As we all know, we're all teachers, whiteboard use is fundamental in assisting students learning and also to help the teacher be clear on what they are asking of the students. This goes for all types of classroom settings, but it is especially important and useful in the English as a foreign language setting. The objectives of today's session, we would hope that by the end of this session, teachers, you will be better able to understand better the importance of effective use of the whiteboard in the EFL classroom. And also, we would like to help you develop strategies and techniques to enhance whiteboard usage while being aware of potential pitfalls, challenges, and how to overcome them.
Most definitely. So, the importance of whiteboard use. So, as I said at the beginning, almost every classroom in any school teaching any subject will have a whiteboard of some sort in. This point alone illustrates how important a whiteboard is, be it a whiteboard, a traditional whiteboard, should we say, or even an interactive whiteboard, which has a few more technological aspects to it. So in what ways do you guys think that a whiteboard plays a fundamental role in the learning of students? Let us know in the chat. I'll give you a few seconds to type your responses. And
I'll
Ruth,
be monitoring the chat.
please,
So
thank you.
please, all comments are welcome. The more you interact, the better we can actually deliver this session, more customized to your needs.
And Ruth, yeah, feel free to interrupt me with any responses you feel are need highlighting, should we say?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll be looking at three now, and they are as follows. So enhancing the visual learning for students. So that will include sectioning, so portioning off the whiteboard into sections, into different parts to clarify points that are made and to maybe group words together. Let's say like grouping verbs together or prepositions, rather than the whiteboard looking a little bit messy with words all over the place. It's good to section the points that you want. Color coding is, I would argue, quite fundamental in learning, especially for visual learners. You can use different colors to highlight different words. So you can put the verbs in blue, you can put prepositions in red, and things like that. Games, you can use the whiteboard to play games, which also benefits more kinesthetic learners, I would say. Diagrams, charts, illustrations for emphasis, so we can underline important aspects of language to highlight their importance of what's being taught. Bullet pointing helps order the board in a more visually appealing way rather than having loads and loads of text. If we just write short bullet points, this can also aid retention for the learners. Sequential writing, so looking at stories and the beginning, the middle, and the end. So the sequence of a particular piece of text. And for example, so if you're eliciting from students, you can write their examples on the board for the whole class to see if they didn't hear the response from the student eliciting. Leading on from kind of what I just said, using the whiteboard encourages student interaction. Okay, so we can invite the students to use the board. This kind of gives them more ownership to their learning, and could also aid retention and, we hope, enhance engagement. I remember when I was in school, not necessarily learning a foreign language, but definitely in the sciences, I would say, and maybe history, going up to the board and writing things onto the board definitely made me feel more engaged with the lesson, which helps. And we're going to see it's a flexible and adaptive teaching tool. So we can do spontaneous activities with the whiteboard. We can do group work, student contributions, lesson structure. So you could even put how you want the lesson to go on the whiteboard. So the first 10 minutes, we're going to do a warm up. The second or the next 10 minutes will be modeling of what's to come, etc., etc. Multimodal teaching. So we can use the whiteboard in different ways. So it can be for visual things. We can use it for kinesthetic learners. So it's not just used as a visual tool, but yeah, can be used in different ways to help different kinds of learners. Interactive whiteboards, which we'll go into, and whiteboards which can integrate other forms of media. Okay,
Great.
so, oh,
Sorry,
sorry,
Luke,
sorry.
can you go back,
Yeah, of
please?
course, sorry.
Lovely. So we had a few comments here and they all relate to what you just said.
Good.
So basically you can save what you write. So I guess that refers, Eleanor, to enhancing memory. So you creating a collection of what you've covered in that lesson. Yes, it is important for that. It is also important for sharing content, ideas and information, everything that's happening in the classroom. Definitely, everything gets recorded there. And something really interesting that relates to all the points that you mentioned earlier for attention. It is
Hmm.
so true.
Yeah, it's true.
Sometimes students get off track. And then you go to the board, you write something on the board, you start using the whiteboard, and then they get back on track, which is very
Yeah,
important.
definitely. That's something definitely that I overlooked in this. But yeah, if all of the students are focused on one area or they're looking at the same thing, this definitely helps attention. More important than ever nowadays with much more distractions. So planning whiteboard use. We've just seen briefly how important the whiteboard is. However, it's not just using it for the sake of using it. When we use the whiteboard, we must ensure that in the using of the whiteboard, it enhances learning. So like we plan lessons, we should plan the use of the whiteboard. So Ruth, do you want to?
So,
Sorry.
we know that planning for lessons is essential. We know that because that means we do our job before and then during the lesson, students do. That's the important thing. So, planning how to use a whiteboard is also equally important. So, the layout of the whiteboard is key. It needs to have relevant information displayed in a way that is easy for learners to understand. So, do you have any whiteboard layout techniques? Please do let us know in the chat. How do you organize your whiteboard? What strategies, what techniques do you use?
Yes, please let us know. And then Ruth, same as the previous slide, just let me know or interject
Well,
whenever you
do.
feel appropriate. So some of these kind of crossover from what the last slide said. So sectioning and color coding are good ways to plan whiteboard use, but a few others include ensure that your writing is obviously clear and legible. I remember when I first started teaching, I am left-handed, so I write across the words that I've just written. So I had to change how I held the pen, not to smudge any words to make sure the writing was still legible for the students. Color coding, as I mentioned previously, highlights the importance of different kinds of information and managing space efficiently. So, like I said, sectioning and dividing the board into different elements. And we will see a bit later on how if this isn't done, it can lead to actually it becoming detrimental to the learners and the learners getting confused and not really understanding what we want them to be to be uh, to be
That's
to be understood. Sorry.
No, that's actually true, but I think that's quite challenging, especially when you're covering a lot in the lesson.
Hmm.
And at the beginning, when we are new teachers, it's quite hard to manage your space because you need a lot. You're
Hmm.
delivering a lot. So it's kind of hard to choose what you want to put there. Also, color coding. I've got something to say here. Because I remember when I was doing my Delta, I had a very strict system. So green was for grammar, red was for exceptions. So I had that color code for different things. And it turned out that my tutor was colorblind.
Oh, wow.
So my whole system fell apart. I couldn't use it. So I used different types of writing. So capital letters,
Hmm.
small letters, italics. So that's how I managed it. So there are different ways of coding. Don't only rely on color. That was what I learned back
Yeah,
then.
that's very good point. Yeah, I remember when I first started as well. I just wanted to throw everything on the whiteboard, and it just made the whiteboard look, in hindsight, a complete mess, even for myself. So God only knows what it looked like for the learners. So yeah, managing space efficiently is paramount from what I've learned. And then finally, using mind maps and flowcharts can make the visuals more interesting and also more coherent rather than loads and loads of text. If we have like arrows and things like that, it can make the board look more visually appealing, but also kind of help with the logical process of what's being taught. So mind maps and flowcharts help in this aspect as well. Ruth, any responses in the chat or
Nothing related
no?
to strategies to plan the
Okay,
whiteboard.
cool, no problem. Let's move on then. So effective whiteboard use techniques. Oh, I need to move because I can't quite read all of that. Okay, so the whiteboard is a tool which has remained in the classroom despite technological advances. However, just because something is useful doesn't mean it's always used in an effective way. So we'll look at 4 ways here on how to ensure effective whiteboard use. Again, some of these will be slight repetitions of what we've already been said, but this just kind of emphasizes how important these specific elements are. So writing clearly and legibly. It's a visual tool primarily, so we need to make sure what is put on the whiteboard is as it is able to be read, and that it's written in a clear and understandable way for the learners. Uh,
It's interesting that you know that most learners think that all English teachers have the same handwriting. I think we develop this skill. We try and make it clear and legible. So
mhm.
it is interesting that they think we all have the same handwriting.
Yeah, so we have a telephone voice as well. Um, using diagrams and illustrations. So this will kind of engage the learners more visually. So we can use storyboards, illustrations, vocabulary banks to assist students. I remember when I was in my teacher training, my tutor would put a vocabulary board in the bottom right-hand corner of the board, and any new vocabulary that the students found, he would then write that into the box, and then they would save maybe 5, 10 minutes towards the end of the lesson and go over the new vocabulary. So it can be really good for students to see, but also for teachers to remind themselves of what they need to cover or what they have covered. Incorporating student contributions, good for kinesthetic learners as a way for students to be actively writing on the board. And then again, managing space efficiently. So a clear section board will help understanding color coding, but also changing your handwriting, as Ruth has mentioned, helps differentiate elements of language in a consistent way, which is easy to follow.
I think this, what you mentioned earlier brings us to a very important point related to the whiteboard, which is that it needs to be part of a student's learning. It's not only a teacher's tool. And it's not only for kinesthetic learners. I think students need to make use of the whiteboards. So as the whiteboard becomes a tool in the classroom, in the student-centered classroom. And that's what you're going to talk about in a minute, I suppose.
Interactive activities. Okay, so using whiteboard for interactive activities can help promote student engagement, and this is what Ruth was alluding to just a moment ago. If we can promote activities where the students are using the whiteboard, not only the teacher, it becomes their learning tool, and it's better for the students to feel comfortable using this rather than just solely looking at it. So that's expanding a little bit on what Ruth just said. We can use it to illustrate complex language concepts in easier to understand ways, okay? And it allows the teacher or other students, which is obviously promoted, peer learning, peer teaching, to provide some real-time feedback. So what you'll see later on in this slide is not an exhaustive list of interactive activities which can be performed using the whiteboard, but what interactive activities do you use for your whiteboard? Do let us know.
I've already heard brainstorming quite a few times. I've read it. And we've got new vocabulary, mind maps, games. So these teachers exploit the whiteboard.
Not on it. Good. Lovely. As if by magic, brainstorming sessions. So we can use the whiteboard to gather ideas from students, let the students write their ideas on the board themselves rather than eliciting and then us writing. Get the students to come up and use it on a gather ideas on particular topics and use the whiteboard to note down suggestions. This encourages visual learning, active learning, and allows for whole class collaboration. Word games, Hangman, Pictionary, word searches, crosswords on the board are fun and effective ways to reinforce vocabulary and focus on spelling, especially Hangman. Well, all of them, to be honest. But yeah, I remember playing Hangman in the class when I was younger. It was a lot of fun, but you're also reinforcing how to spell particular words, right? So it's a good way for the students to reinforce what they've learned without knowing that it's being reinforced. And then collaborative tasks. So this one's a favorite at MLA during the summers. We like dividing the whiteboard into half or even thirds if the class population is slightly too big for halves, and allow students to work on the board together. So you've got one team using the left-hand side of the board, one team on the right-hand side, maybe one in the middle if you've divided it into threes, and all of the students from the group can all work on the whiteboard at the same time. Obviously, this needs to be done in a respectful and orderly way. But this is very much one where the teacher can kind of take a step back, observe the whiteboard, and let the students work together and put their ideas or complete the activities on the whiteboard themselves. So, I mean, as we've got on the PowerPoint here, can be sentence writing, reordering sentences, or filling the blanks. You could do as a warm-up activity some like relay races as well for vocabulary maybe. So there's an endless supply of activities which the students can do on the board. And group presentations, another one that we like at MLA. So the whiteboard facilitates presentations amazingly. Okay. The students can write directly onto the board, they can project onto, which is more often the case nowadays. Media during a presentation on the whiteboard makes it more interesting if you've got some music maybe or a video. So this can help with the presentation. It can also help clarify elements for the audience. Okay. So these are some good interactive ways of getting the students really to use the whiteboard more than the teacher.
Mhm. I think it's really interesting as well. We've got some ideas here. Um, Interactive. All whiteboards are interactive, not
Hmm.
only the digital
Hmm.
whiteboards.
Hmm.
That's what we're trying to highlight here. Because of course we can use, as Maria Laura said a minute ago, we'll look into that in a minute. Digital books and videos, movies. We can exploit the digital one, but all whiteboards should be
Hmm.
interactive. And then Julia mentioned the flipped classroom. Definitely. It's not only an instructive tool, it's not for direct instruction. It should be
Hmm.
part of the classroom in a collaborative, interactive manner.
Definitely. Okay, so technology integration. Let me just move the box down. So in previous PowerPoints, we've spoken about technology integration in different ways. At this point, yeah, it's fundamental and irreversible in EFL teaching, and it's the same with the whiteboard. So this includes technological advances of the whiteboards. Like we say, we've gone from the traditional whiteboard to the more digital one now. Um, and being able to further this development is necessary to enhance the learning outcomes for students. So, as we mentioned, probably the most common interactive whiteboards, I would say a lot of schools, universities, institutions will have interactive whiteboards now. Um, they are more common, and they allow for the use of video and images, and greater engagement. As we've seen, it's not that you can't have engagement with a traditional whiteboard, but an interactive whiteboard maybe allows for more things to be potentially done on.
It is
Digital.
interesting though, because it needs to be used effectively as well,
Hmm.
doesn't it,
Yeah,
Luke?
yeah,
I
of
mean, you
course.
have those videos, but it cannot be a passive tool.
No, no,
All
no.
whiteboards need to be interactive, don't they?
Hmm. Yep.
So it's not about just playing a video, playing a game,
Yeah.
projecting the book. It's about students using it
Hmm.
and teachers planning how they're going to get the students to use it effectively to
Hmm.
enhance learning.
Yeah. Uh, and a way to do this, perhaps, is using digital tools and apps. So we can use external apps like BBC Learning, Quizlet, and YouTube, providing that the content is appropriate, to reinforce learning concepts. I know at MLA, at the centre that I was at last year, a few of the teachers used Quizlet and made quizzes to reinforce what had been taught in the lessons. So that's a good way. As well with Quizlet, you're kind of gamifying the learning, so the learners are not, let's say, not aware that they're continuing to learn because it's more fun, it's a game, um, but it is reinforcing what's been taught in the lesson or activating prior knowledge that they already have. Recording and sharing content, again, something that we really encourage at MLA during the summer, where the students are doing presentations and videos on specific things. Um, so having this on the whiteboard to demonstrate the material that they've done to the whole class is usually very fun, and it adds a lot of dynamism to the class. Like it's a lot of fun, and everybody's motivated to share what they've done, and everybody gets into uh, quite a good attitude towards it. I would say. Okay, so some common pitfalls or challenges and solutions to those. So we've mentioned how the whiteboard can be effective, and how it can be exploited for interactive activities and in terms of technological development. But we must be mindful of the eagerness to use the whiteboard to its fullest potential can hinder or confuse students if it's not used in a mindful way. So if you've experienced any pitfalls, let us know in the chat. And then Ruth, if you can just keep an eye on it,
I will
that
do.
would be great. So some common pitfalls of using a whiteboard. I've mentioned a few already, but we'll just talk about them in slightly more detail. So lack of organization. If the information is placed on the whiteboard at random, it can be hard for learners to follow, especially if we're trying to explain interlinking concepts. There needs to be a logical flow. So this could be sectioning, using consistent color coding, or text, as Ruth mentioned, using capital letters for some words and lowercase for all the others,
Mm.
italics, things like this. Um,
It is
or
important that the flow, the logical flow, comes from a learner's perspective.
Mhm,
Because we teachers, we understand things in a different way. We already know what we're going to deliver. So, how would a learner understand the concept? How would a learner remember a word? How would a learner recall, use something, a diagram for reference when they're going back to answering questions? So I think that's key, the logical flow from a learner's
mhm.
perspective.
And with this, something that we mentioned earlier, using kind of like flow charts is quite good for this as well, especially for visual learners. Poor handwriting, as mentioned, which is something that I struggled with to begin with, and still
I think
do
we
when
all
I'm,
did, Luke. We
yeah.
all
So
did.
I still struggle, to be honest, now when I'm just writing in a notebook. So yeah, obviously, if the learners can't read what's put on the board, then it doesn't help their learning. It's not conducive to them. So we need to make sure that handwriting is legible, um, and again, done in a way that makes the learning as easy as possible for the learner. Um, Overcrowding kind of goes hand in hand with lack of communication. Sorry, lack of organization. If we're putting too much on the whiteboard in a haphazard, ad hoc, random way, it will render the information confusing and maybe irrelevant. If loads of information is written, then which parts are most important to note down, right? We should only be putting the fundamental elements of text or of what we want the learners to be cognizant of on the whiteboard. If we put absolutely
Mm.
everything on, it's just too much information. It's confusing.
Overwhelming as well as
Overwhelming,
a
100%.
learning,
Yeah.
as a learner, sorry.
100%.
Keywords, Rosalara said, something that Francesca mentioned, which I think is really interesting. And it relates to what we said, and I said before about the logical flow,
Hmm.
different styles of learning. Of course, we may have, as Luke mentioned, visual learners, and then, diagrams, illustrations are key. We also have kinesthetic learners who would want to interact physically with whiteboards. But any kind of learner, sometimes we actually have to get them to speak, to read what's on the whiteboard. And it is very important that we exploit the whiteboard for different types of learners so we don't repeat the same activity over and over again or the same coding over and over again. Very good
Hmm.
point, Francesca. Thank you.
Good. So to overcome some of these issues, these challenges, it's imperative that we plan our whiteboard use effectively. Like I mentioned previously, as we plan our lessons, we should be planning what we use the whiteboard for and make best use of the instruments to help us teach the learners and for the learners to understand and for the learners to use themselves. So to conclude,
Right, so we've come to the end of the session. So
Mhm.
basically, the conclusion here, as usual, is plan, plan, plan. Plan the whiteboard use effectively before your lesson, just to make sure that we know exactly what we want to put on the whiteboards and how the information will be displayed to make understanding easier, better, more comprehensive, and more memorable for learners. Also, exploit the techniques when using the whiteboard and make it student-centered. The whiteboard should be interactive, no matter if it's only a piece of white or even with chalk, it needs to be interactive. It's primarily used for writing and by the teacher for instruction, but it could be more productive to use diagrams, charts, illustrations to get students to put their thoughts and answers on the whiteboard so that we can actually adapt to different learning styles. And despite being in a fixed position in the classroom, the whiteboard, whichever type, can be used in a flexible and adaptive way. So we can move it around. We can do a lot of things with it.
Oh,
And
right.
introduce interactive activities and technological integration. So if you have the chance to project on the whiteboard, use it for it as well. Use
Mhm.
websites, apps, but also from a student-centered perspective. It's not only for projecting, it's for students to use to make
Mhm.
it interactive.
Yeah, most definitely.
And again, so any suggestions? We have many ideas for future webinars as usual, but we always welcome your ideas. And if is there anything you'd like us to prepare for you, please do let us know. Write them in the chat, send us an email, whichever works best for you, but we welcome ideas.
So as always, guys, thank you for your attention. As I said at the outset, you'll receive a certificate of participation. If you don't receive it within the next week, email us at formazione@mlaworld.com. There's an accompanying handout containing all information, links, slides used in this webinar. And next week, the 23rd of January, we'll be looking at winter in the EFL classroom. So we hope you can join us again for that one. So have a good evening, everybody. Thank you for your participation and your attention. And we will look forward to seeing you again very, very soon.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye. Bye. Bye.